and welcome back to another episode of the Dylbozer's Den, where today we're going to be talking about the seventh album from Manchester, England's own slamming death metal giants, Ingested. Their newest record is titled The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams. This is the second release on Metal Blade Records, their most recent release through the label being Ashes Lie Still in 2022. If you're not familiar with this band, they've been around for almost 20 years at this point, with, obviously 6 other releases underneath their belt. I've been familiar with the band's name for many years, but maybe didn't give them the attention and listening depth that I normally do with a lot of artists. But I really started to take notice with their 2020 release, Where Only Gods May Tread. 2020 was a weird year for a lot of us, doing anything and everything we could to occupy ourselves in a positive manner and take our mind off what was going on with the world. And what I dug into was music. I listened to things I'd never heard before. I listened to things that maybe I used to listen to and came back to. And there were 2 bands in particular out of kind of these modern death metal bands and deathcore bands and slam, whatever you want to call it, that I really should have enjoyed a lot more when I first heard them. But for so many years, I was engrossed in death metal and death metal adjacent music, a la deathcore, slam, black metal, black and death metal, you name it. We're all fucking nerds. That I kind of shrugged off a lot of bands that I shouldn't have. And 2 releases from 2 bands that really stuck out to me: Fit for an Autopsy, Sea of Tragic Beast, and obviously the aforementioned Ingested record from 2020. It opened me up and reinvigorated a love for this form of music that I kind of shrugged off as being a phase in time. It really just started to dawn on me that there was actual songcraft and songwriting and hooks in this form of music again. When you play music during an era of time and you're surrounded with bands that all have a similar sound, and maybe it just starts to get watered down to you, and maybe it's just being shoved down your throat for so long, you just have to get away from it for a while. Not only did it reinvigorate a love for like death metal and blast beats and all that again, but it definitely allowed me to open up my horizons of what was considered heavy, and I adopted a new approach with how I view music and how I look at music. As just because I don't like it doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's either not made for me or I'm not the target audience, right? But I have taken that approach with a lot of things now, and this band Ingested has helped usher into that. I actually had a chance to see both the bands I mentioned, Fit for an Autopsy and Ingested, live in like March of 2021 with one of my best friends, Zach Yearwood. I just remember enjoying how much of a live band they were. They were a 3-piece at the time. It was guitar, drums, vocals, and probably programmed bass and some backing tracks. One great live band. The music fits it. Everything they're doing fits in the live atmosphere. Sometimes bands will go over really well on a record, and maybe they have to try harder live or vice versa. This band, I think, does better live than maybe the representation is on their records. And this new record is no different than that. That's not to say that the records sound bad or poorly done. They're not by any means. They're pretty proficient at what they do and fairly accurate with all of the song choices and song structures. The crowd's into it. The band's into it. They're having fun with it. There's a quote from vocalist Jason Evans. He is attempting to get the crowd riled up and backed into the songs and getting into everything. And he makes the quote. He's like, hey, if you know the words, sing along. But if not, it's fucking death metal. Just make noise. Who cares? That is an approach I've had to this form of music for so long. It's like the vocals are there to enhance the music, and they're another instrument. They're not necessarily there to be the focal point. It's all part of it, right? But that's not what we get on this record. What we get is Ingested doing what Ingested does best, which is this slamming, groovy, kind of beat downy death metal with modern production and modern technologies. They're starting to kind of venture out into different territory here with some clean vocals or melodic vocals, taking some chances with that. A lot of death metal bands. Actually, let's get down to that. This is a death metal band. It's not a deathcore band. It's not a slam band. It's not a metalcore band. It's a death metal band. It's okay. Death metal bands can have slam parts. Death metal bands can have breakdowns. It's very much there. It's very much part of it. There's going to be some knuckleheads that are not going to enjoy that, but get over it. This is a record that is very much in the same vein as Ashes Lie Still, but also has some differing textures to it. I found myself really engrossed with this album from the get-go. Ashes Lie Still took a couple listens to really latch onto it. That's not to say Ashes Lie Still was not one of my favorite releases of 2022, because it was. You know what you're kind of getting with Ingested. You know you're getting this slamming, brutal, modern produced form of death metal. It's very much in kind of the same retrospective. You know what you're getting with the Dying Fetus release. You know you're going to get just really catchy songs, really, slamming beat down parts. You're going to get a lot of note flourishes here and there. Like, this is very much a consistent thing that this band has done. 7 releases, almost 20 years, not bad. And that's not including EPs and, re-recordings and hold on. But with this album, you're already presented with the 3 tracks that dropped from the album, which is Paragon of Purity, Pantheon, and Endless Machine, which are all 3 standout tracks. You also get this great artwork from David Seidman, who did the album artwork for Ashes Lie Still as well. I don't necessarily know what I'm looking at with the art because I have a caveman brain. It makes me think of like a Del Toro film with the kind of split face creatures and everything. But I really enjoyed it. I like the shades of blue on there, and the shades of blue kind of go with the word tide for me. It makes me think of oceanic themes. I thoroughly enjoyed the album. I think the production work on this is great. Christian Donaldson of Cryptopsy did the mixing and the mastering of this recording. There's also some great guest spots on this record. You've got Mark Hunter from Chimera on the track In Nothingness, which is absolutely one of the standout tracks on the whole album. I'm not entirely certain if some of the guys from Chimera are on the track other than Mark, but there are some guitar melodies on that track that make me think of stuff from the self-titled Chimera album in 2005. It definitely makes me think of the track Nothing Remains. You've also got Josh Middleton of Silosis on Expect to Fail, which is definitely a song that sounds like it would have Josh on it. There are some themes and there's some parts in the song that definitely sound like Silosis a lot. Obviously, this band, as I stated before, is a 3-piece, but they do have a bass player that tracks for them. Dominic Gramont of Canadian tech metal legends Ion Dissonance. He has done the bass, I believe, on the last 2 full lengths. He may have even done the bass on Where Only Gods May Tread, but I'm not entirely for sure on that. But this is a great record so far. I mean, you've got some heavyweight stuff on here. I will say that you've got a little bit more keyboards on here done by Nico Bonanno, who's also done some production work with the band and on this record. I mentioned the 3 tracks that dropped for this album prior to the album's release, which was Paragon of Purity, Pantheon, and Endless Machine. A couple other tracks that I really wanted to point out is the song Starve the Fire, which has this Middle Eastern kind of vibe to it to me. Maybe not in the sense of like a High on Fire track, but definitely in the sense of like death metal a la Nile. The opening riff of this has a very After the Burial kind of thing going on. To me, when you use riffs like that, those kind of staccato single note riffs in sparing moments, it doesn't become played out. So it really fits this track a lot. Nominous. It definitely highlights kind of dynamics on the record. It definitely shows that this band is more than a one-trick pony of playing slamming death metal. There's a lot of melodic, maybe even some classical guitar, some Spanish guitar stuff on there. In Nothingness, which is the track that has Mark Hunter, sounds like Ingested, but I can also hear their influences from like Suffocation and Dying Fetus coming out in this, and even some of their Crowbar influences. This band is very prone to use an inverted power chord, which is where you essentially play a root 5 power chord or a root power chord, and you take the 5th of the root and you play the lower octave of the 5th. That's about all I know from music theory. But this band's very prone to do that, which fits when you're a 1 guitar band trying to fill out the sound and you don't have a bass player. For references to that type of guitar playing, you can look at stuff off of the Anthropocene Extinction by Cattle Decapitation. They use that a lot. Crowbar uses it eternally. That's kind of known as the crowbar chord. Kirk is very adamant about using that chord in the music. The track Pantheon is probably my favorite single released off the album. It's a short, it's a fast one, does the Ingested kind of slam groove thing really well. I could give that track to anybody that's never heard this band and go, hey, this is what you're going to get with this band. I think the last 2 tracks on the album are by far my favorites of the whole thing. Kingdom of Sand, it just sounds like a straightforward kind of mid to late 2000s death metal track. And I know that's a period of time for death metal when a lot of people lost interest, but that's kind of that's the area that I really started to get into it. Those late 90s releases, those early 2000s releases. It's just a straightforward death metal track to me. You know, it has that inverted power chord all over it, adds a thickness to it, adds a weight, makes it sound really heavy and weighty just with the tone of those chords. And then you get a great swinging breakdown at the end of it. And then that breakdown is continued on for the rest of the track, but it then goes into like double kick under that. And I'm sure it's double time at that point, but just great songwriting overall. And the final track, I love this track. A Path Once Lost. This might be the most progressive and adventurous thing that this band has done to date. It's definitely the most progressive song on the album. You've got this great, clean, melodic intro with clean vocals, legitimate clean vocals, not like pitch screaming. It reminds me of the track off of their 2020 release with Kirk from Crowbar on it called Another Breath. It fits, except this time they didn't need a guest vocalist to do it so well. Shout out to all these guys on this release. They really put effort into it. I think with their Metal Blade release, Ashes Lie Still from 2022, that really helped them get more recognition to the American crowd. I always felt with this band that they were huge in like the UK and Europe, but you never got a lot of them here. And maybe that comes from like record labels and all that crap. But they've definitely had a lot more presence here. I mean, hell, they played 3 times between 2021 and 2023 in Nashville, Tennessee alone. And that's just the 3 that I know of. I would really love to see this band do an album that sounds like A Path Once Lost in whole, just to hear that and see the type of textures and stuff that they could do. That would be a great, hell, it doesn't even have to be an album. It could be an EP. You give me a bunch of songs like that, I'm sold. You know, that definitely brings in their influences of like sludge, death metal, doom metal for that fact, even some metalcore influences. Because let's get it straight here, guys. You know, there's modern death metal bands forming out. If it's a bunch of younger guys and probably their early to mid 30s, they listen to 2000s metalcore. They listen to deathcore that came after that, and they listen to death metal as well. There's probably some new metal thrown in there. You know, it's part of it. We're millennials. This is what we've got. I don't normally bring up any sort of negatives because there aren't any negatives for this album or for many of the things I review. I do feel like that this is a live band. These songs transfer so well live that is where Ingested is. I think it's best is live. Check out this album. You're going to like it. It's a great record. I hope to see many more. I also hope to really see some more songs in the vein of A Path Once Lost. Again, Ingested, The Tide of Death and Fractured Dreams, out on Metal Blade Records. Check it out.